cuffs of his tailored suit, glancing once more at his reflection in the mirror behind the bar. The ambient lighting of the high-end restaurant gave his sharp features an even colder edge. He hated this. Blind dates were not his thing. He preferred structure, control, none of which existed in whatever setup his best friend Jason had arranged tonight. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, reaching for the glass of scotch he had barely touched. Jason's voice still echoed in his head. "Just one dinner, man. She's sweet, kind, grounded. You need to meet someone who doesn't care about the suits and headlines." Nathan sighed. Against his better judgment, he stayed. A few tables away, Lila Hart stood at the entrance, nervously smoothing the second-hand dress she had borrowed for the night. Her blonde hair was loosely pinned back, soft strands framing a pale face. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, searching the dining room. Her employer, Victoria, the elegant woman who owned the house where Lila worked as a nanny, had insisted she go. "You deserve one nice night, Lila. He's a good man, and you deserve to be loved." Still, Lila felt out of place. The chandeliers were too bright, the silverware too polished. She clutched her small purse and made her way toward the table number Victoria had texted her. Nathan looked up. For a moment, time cracked open. The woman walking toward him was no stranger. It was her, Lila Hart. He nearly stood in shock. Years collapsed into seconds. The golden hair, the delicate features, thinner now, yes, warier, but unmistakable. The girl who used to laugh with him under oak trees. The girl who vanished without a single goodbye. Lila hesitated, sensing his gaze, then continued toward him. "Mr. Cole?" she asked softly, assuming he was a client from one of the extra shifts she had taken on. "I think there's been a mix-up." It's me," Nathan said, standing now. His voice was quieter than he expected, but steady. "Nathan." She blinked. Her lips parted slightly. The recognition hit her like cold rain. Her fingers trembled where they clutched the back of the chair. I did not know." Her voice faltered. Neither of them sat down. Nathan's heart pounded. "You were set up on a blind date tonight?" Lila nodded slowly, unable to find words. "I was too," he exhaled, a humorless smile tugging at his lips. "Jason set me up. He said she was kind. Real." "Victoria," Lila murmured. She said something similar. They stood there, awkward, suspended in the strange gravity between past and present. Nathan was the first to speak again. His eyes searched hers, guarded but aching. "Why did you leave without a word, Lila?" Her breath caught. The restaurant blurred around her. All the noise, the polished silver, the crystal, it disappeared behind the weight of his question. She looked down, then met his eyes. "You don't know the feeling," she whispered, "of a girl who lost everything, with no one left in this world." Nathan opened his mouth, but she had already turned. Without another word, Lila walked away, out of the restaurant, into the night, the sound of her heels echoing behind her like a fading memory. Nathan stood frozen, the past crashing into him like a wave he never saw coming. His fingers grazed the edge of the tablecloth. For a man who built empires and controlled boardrooms, he suddenly felt powerless. The blind date was over. But something far more complicated had just begun. Nathan stood alone in his penthouse, the city lights of Manhattan stretching endlessly beyond the tall glass windows. His jacket was slung over one arm, his tie undone, but he barely noticed the cold air drifting through the cracked open balcony door. His thoughts were somewhere else, stuck in a different place, in a different time. He crossed the room slowly, heading toward the antique writing desk tucked against the far wall. The drawer opened with a soft creak, and from inside, he pulled out a small, folded square of cloth, a handkerchief, pale blue, slightly worn at the edges. On one corner, faintly stitched in delicate thread, were the initials N.C. He held it in both hands, thumb tracing the embroidery. She had made it for him. Years ago, in a town that felt 1,000 miles away from here, Lila had sat beside him under the old oak tree behind her house. He still remembered the way sunlight caught in her golden hair, how her fingers moved slowly, carefully, threading needle through fabric while he read aloud from a worn-out novel. She had laughed at his dramatic voice. He had memorized the sound. That summer had smelled like fresh grass and hope. "I'm going to give this to you when you graduate," she had said, holding up the handkerchief shyly, "so you never forget me when you're in that big, busy world." He had promised he never would. He had meant it. Nathan pressed the cloth to his lips, then folded it back with care and slid it into the drawer. His chest ached, not with anger, not even confusion anymore, just a hollow, quiet ache that had never really gone away. He turned toward the window, eyes fixed on nothing, trying to make sense of tonight. She had walked away again, just like last time. No closure, no answers, only pain, dressed in a second-hand dress and familiar eyes. Across town, in a neighborhood most of the city chose to forget, Lila pushed open the peeling door to her apartment. The hallway light flickered above her. The air inside was cold. She had turned the heat off to save money that week. But the moment she stepped in, warmth met her, not from the space, but from the small voice that called out, "Mommy." Lucy ran out from the bedroom, her little pink dress slightly wrinkled, feet bare, carrying a stuffed rabbit by one ear. Lila dropped to her knees and caught the girl in her arms. Her blonde hair fell loose from its clip as she pressed her face into Lucy's soft curls. For a second, she just held her, breathing in the familiar scent of baby powder and worn cotton. "I missed you," Lucy whispered. "I missed you too, sweetheart." Lila stood, lifting the child against her hip, and walked into their tiny living room. A cracked window was sealed with tape. The floor creaked beneath her tired feet. On the chipped coffee table sat a drawing Lucy had made. A sun, a house, and two stick figures holding hands. "Is that us?" she asked gently. Lucy nodded, proud. "I drew us happy." Lila smiled, but her eyes didn't. She tucked the drawing into a book on the shelf, then carried Lucy to the couch. After the girl fell asleep on her lap, Lila stared at the shadows on the ceiling, her arms still wrapped around her child. Tonight had torn something open. She had not expected to see him again. Nathan Cole, so different now, but still carrying the same eyes, the same voice that once whispered promises under a tree. The man she had left behind when life collapsed, not because she stopped loving him, but because she had nothing left to give. And somehow, even now, part of her still didn't. She looked down at Lucy, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the dark. "Sorry for leaving. Sorry for surviving. Sorry for still missing a boy from a summer long gone." In two corners of the city, two hearts beat quietly, aching for something that once was, and uncertain if it could ever be again. Nathan sat in his office, the blue light from his laptop reflecting off the glass wall behind him. He had barely slept since the night at the restaurant. Something about Lila's words haunted him. "You don't know the feeling of a girl who lost everything." He told himself to move on. She had made her choice, but curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, pulled him in. He typed her name into the company's internal directory system. Nothing came up under employment, but when he searched through recent HR activity connected to his friend Victoria's household, the same Victoria who had insisted he go on that blind date, he found it. Lila Hart. Domestic staff. Contracted as a live-in nanny. Nathan sat back in his chair. So that was why Victoria had been pushing him to meet someone. She had known. The next day, Nathan made a casual visit to Victoria's townhouse, tucked away in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. When she opened the door, she smiled wide. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Victoria teased. "What brings the elusive Mr. Cole to my humble home?" "Just thought I'd check in," he replied. "It's been a while." Victoria raised an eyebrow but stepped aside to let him in. "Come in. I just put the kettle on." As they walked through the foyer, Nathan's eyes landed on a framed photo resting on a side table. It was of Victoria's toddler laughing in Lila's arms. Lila's hair was pulled back in a messy bun, but her smile, tired, warm, and genuine, took his breath away. He stared at the picture a little longer than he should have. "She's wonderful with kids," Victoria said, noticing. "That one adores her. I don't know what I'd do without Lila." Nathan nodded silently. Victoria continued, almost to herself. "She's been through a lot. Works harder than anyone I've met. Nanny during the day, dishes at a diner by night, all for her little girl." Nathan turned his head, surprised. "She has a daughter?" Victoria looked at him, surprised that he did not know. "Yes, Lucy. Sweet little thing. About 3, I think. They're a package deal. But I honestly do not know how Lila does it. She never complains, just shows up and gives her best, every single day." In the kitchen, Lila stood at the stove, spoon-feeding Victoria's baby. She could hear every word. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment. She kept her head down, eyes fixed on the bowl of mashed carrots in her hand. She knew she should not care, but knowing Nathan was just feet away, hearing all the humiliating details of her life, that she worked nights washing dishes, that she barely scraped by, it made her want to disappear. Still, she kept feeding the child with steady hands. Back in the living room, Nathan remained quiet. But the image of Lila working 2 jobs, raising a daughter alone, living in the shadows of his world, it stirred something deep inside him. Not pity, not guilt, just a quiet, aching respect. That night, rain tapped against the cracked window of Lila's apartment. She had just finished changing Lucy into her pajamas, the tiny girl in her usual pink dress now curling up on a pile of blankets. Lila leaned her head against the wall, exhaustion settling in her bones. Just as she sat down, her phone buzzed. A message from her evening boss at the diner. "You're late again. Don't bother coming in tomorrow. We need someone focused." Lila stared at the screen, stunned. She had missed her shift because Lucy had woken up burning with a fever. She had stayed home to cool her down with wet cloths, using up the last of the children's medicine she had. Now, she had no second job. She opened the drawer where she kept her bills, hoping she had enough to make rent. Instead, she found a folded notice. "Final warning. Rent overdue. You have 7 days to vacate." Her hand trembled as she set the paper down. The apartment spun around her. She stepped outside onto the narrow hallway and sank to the floor by the door. The light above her flickered. Tears fell before she could stop them. "Mommy." She looked up. Lucy stood in the doorway in her pink dress, rubbing her eyes, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Why are you crying?" Lila quickly wiped her cheeks and forced a smile. "I'm not crying, baby. I just got something in my eye." Lucy toddled over and wrapped her small arms around her mother's neck. Lila closed her eyes, holding on. Everything inside her wanted to collapse. But for now, she just breathed and kept going. The late afternoon sun filtered through the windows of the small cafe tucked between a laundromat and a florist, casting long, golden streaks across the tile floor. Lila adjusted the thin apron around her waist and picked up the tray with practiced hands, balancing 2 cappuccinos and a small plate of scones. The scent of espresso clung to her clothes, and a few loose strands of her blonde hair had fallen from her ponytail. She had started the job just 2 days ago. It was not ideal, but it helped cover what the nanny work could not, especially with rent overdue. She stepped out from behind the counter, weaving between tables, offering a polite smile to the older couple in the corner as she passed. When she turned toward the booth by the window, her eyes met his. Nathan. He sat beside another man in a suit, someone younger, laughing at something on his phone. Nathan's expression, however, changed the instant he saw her. His conversation halted mid-sentence. Lila stopped in her tracks. Her breath hitched. For a second, neither of them moved. She quickly lowered her gaze and approached the table, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Good afternoon. Here are your drinks." She placed the cups down gently, careful not to let her hand shake. Her heart beat painfully in her chest. Nathan said nothing. He simply watched her, as if trying to decide if she was real. Lila managed a nod, then turned away before his companion could notice the tension in her face. She disappeared behind the counter, where she pretended to check the register. Her hands clutched the edge of the drawer as she tried to calm herself. Nathan remained seated, his mind racing. She looked different, tired, thinner, but it was her. There was no doubt. He had not expected to see her again. Certainly not here, serving coffee in a place like this. When his meeting wrapped up, his companion left first, waving goodbye and stepping outside to take a call. Nathan stayed behind. He walked up to the counter, where Lila was pretending to clean an already spotless surface. "I don't want to make this uncomfortable," he said quietly. She looked up, startled, but said nothing. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed a folded piece of paper on the counter. "I know you probably don't want to talk, and I am not asking you to. But," he paused, "if life ever gets too heavy and you need a place to rest, you can knock. I'm not asking for explanations." Next to the paper, he placed a small business card. It was simple. His name, his personal number, no company branding, not even his assistant's contact. Lila stared at it, then at him. Her lips parted as if she might say something, but no words came. She only gave the faintest nod. Nathan held her gaze a moment longer, then turned and walked out the door, the bell above it chiming softly in his wake. Lila picked up the folded note and held it in her palm. She did not open it. Not yet. Her eyes lingered on the business card, the simple weight of it against her skin more grounding than anything she had felt in days. She tucked them both into her apron pocket. She was not ready. But something in her shifted, just slightly, like a crack in a wall that had stood too long. Outside, the sun dipped behind the skyline, and the cafe settled back into its quiet rhythm. The world had not changed, but something between them had. The call came just after noon. Lila stood frozen in the cramped kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, as Victoria's voice came gently. "I'm so sorry, Lila. It's last minute. We're leaving for Europe in 2 days, at least 2 months. The house will be closed. I have to pause your contract." Lila swallowed. "It's okay. I understand." She hung up and stared at the wall. 2 months. No job. No housing. Just like that, the one bit of stability she had vanished. Behind her, Lucy coughed, a deep, wet sound. The little girl had been running a fever all day. Lila had used up the last of the medicine 2 nights ago. Now, her forehead burned under Lila's hand. Opening her laptop, Lila searched clinics. Most required insurance. One claimed to accept walk-ins. She wrapped Lucy in a blanket, dressed her in the only clean pink dress she had, then headed into the cold. Rain began as a mist and turned steady by the time they arrived. Lila's shoes soaked through. Lucy, limp and half asleep in her arms, whimpered softly. Inside the clinic, a nurse barely looked up. "We're full. Come back tomorrow." "She's sick," Lila said, her voice tight. "Please. No space. Sorry." Lila stepped back into the rain. She spotted the awning of a shuttered bookstore and huddled beneath it, sitting on the cold concrete. Lucy lay in her lap, shivering. Lila wrapped her arms around her daughter and tried to dial every contact she had. Voicemail. No answers. Lucy coughed again, and Lila kissed her temple. "Just a little longer, baby," she whispered. "I'm trying." Headlights flashed across the street. Lila shielded Lucy's eyes, barely noticing, until she heard footsteps approaching. Nathan had just left a corporate event nearby, his jacket slung over one arm, tie loosened. He had been walking to his car when he saw them, 2 figures huddled in the dark. He stopped cold. "Lila?" She looked up, startled, eyes smudged, hair damp. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "We're just waiting out the rain." He did not believe her. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a bottle of water and a clean handkerchief, and knelt. For her. She hesitated, then took them. Nathan's eyes shifted to Lucy's flushed cheeks. "She needs a doctor. We tried. They turned us away." He stood slowly. "Come on. My car's nearby. Let me help. Just this once, if you'll let me." Lila hesitated. Then Lucy coughed again. She nodded. In the car, Lucy lay bundled in Lila's coat. Nathan drove in silence. At the private clinic, Lila rushed Lucy inside while Nathan waited. When the nurse returned with a prescription, Lila's heart sank. I can't afford. Nathan stepped forward, handing over his card. No fuss, he said. Lila stared at him, her throat tight. He made no speech, no performance. He was simply there. Later, as they neared her apartment, Lila looked down at Lucy sleeping in her arms. She's still unwell, and I don't think the heat's working. Nathan nodded. My place. They drove through the quiet city. The silence between them felt familiar, almost soft. Nathan glanced over. You've been carrying the world alone for too long, haven't you? Lila didn't speak. She reached down, took Lucy's small hand, and held it tightly. And for the first time in a very long time, she did not feel quite so alone. The evening had settled over the city in a hush. Nathan's penthouse was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of a single lamp in the corner. In the guest bedroom down the hall, Leela sat on the edge of the bed, gently stroking Lucy's hair as the little girl slept, curled into the blankets. She stepped out into the hallway, closing the door with care. Her phone buzzed in her back pocket. A message from her old friend Mia blinked on the screen. Are you okay? Where are you staying? Lila called her back, walking softly into the sitting room just off the hallway. She kept her voice low, her words careful. I'm safe. We're with someone I used to know. Someone I didn't think I'd ever see again. Mia asked something on the other end, but Lila hesitated before answering. No, he doesn't know everything. Not really. There was a long pause. Then, as if something inside her cracked open, Lila finally began to speak. I left because I had no choice. My mom died right after graduation. I had to take care of everything. Funeral costs, the house. Then my dad started drinking again. Bad. He wasn't just yelling anymore. I was scared to stay, scared to leave. I didn't want Nathan involved in that. I thought I was protecting him. I thought he'd be better off without me. Her voice wavered. And then later, when I found out I was pregnant, I knew I could never go back. Not with that hanging over me. Not when I felt like nothing. I thought if he saw me again, he'd just see the failure I became. She sniffed quietly, wiping her nose on her sleeve. I never stopped loving him. I just stopped believing I deserved to. Unbeknownst to her, Nathan had returned from a call downstairs. He paused in the hallway, just beyond the open doorway, her voice carrying faintly to where he stood. He did not mean to eavesdrop, but he could not bring himself to walk away. He heard only fragments, her mother, her father, being scared, loving him, but it was enough to stop him in his tracks. Then, the elevator chimed. Nathan stepped into the front hall, just in time to see the elevator doors open, and a man step out, tall, casually dressed, with an impatient look and a familiar arrogance in his walk. Is Lila here? The man asked the doorman, who pointed uncertainly toward Nathan. I'm her friend, Nathan said, stepping forward cautiously. And you are? Mark. I'm the father of her kid. Nathan's jaw tightened. Mark shoved his hands into his pockets, shifting his weight. Look, I need to talk to her. I want to see my daughter. I've been trying to track her down for weeks. Before Nathan could respond, Lila emerged behind him. Having heard the commotion, her face went pale. Mark, what are you doing here? We need to talk, he said, stepping toward her. You can't just disappear and take her away like that. I have rights too. Nathan looked at Lila, waiting for her reaction. She stepped in front of Lucy's bedroom door without thinking. You never wanted rights. You disappeared the moment I told you I was pregnant. Do not pretend you care now. Mark scowled. I've changed. Nathan interrupted, voice cold. I think it's time for you to leave. Mark held up his hands. Fine. But this isn't over. He turned and left, the elevator doors swallowing him up. Silence followed. Nathan looked at Lila, his expression unreadable. Something had shifted in his eyes. Not anger, exactly, but something heavier. You didn't tell me he was still in your life, he said quietly. He's not, Lila replied, shaken. I haven't seen him in years. I didn't know he even knew where I was. But Nathan had already stepped back. A wall was going up. I should give you some space, he said. You and Lucy should stay here tonight. But I have work in the morning. She nodded, too stunned to argue. When he left the room, her hands trembled. He had only heard part of the truth. And now, what little peace had begun between them was unraveling again. Nathan had not called. Not once. Lila stared at her phone for the third time that morning, thumb hovering over his name. No message. No reply to the thank you note she had left on his kitchen counter. No response to the text she had sent 2 days ago. Lucy is feeling better. Thank you for everything. She had seen it in his eyes the night Mark appeared. Distance. Doubt. So, the next morning, she packed quietly, carrying her sleeping daughter in her arms, and left his penthouse without a word. Maybe he had only helped out of obligation. Maybe he had realized how messy her life really was. Whatever the reason, he had pulled away. She told herself she understood. Still, it hurt. By week's end, Lila found a night shift cleaning rooms at a downtown hotel. It barely paid the bills. Each evening, she pushed Lucy in the old stroller, bundled in layers, praying the child would sleep through the cold and noise. Mark came by again. Twice. The first time, he lingered outside her building. The second, he followed her from the train, yelling threats. He did not want Lucy. He wanted money. Lila ignored him. She did not call the police, and she did not call Nathan. He had made his silence clear. That night, the rain came fast, cold and unrelenting. Lila had just finished work, her coat soaked, shoes squelching. Lucy was curled beneath a sweater, in her favorite pink dress, half asleep. The street was nearly empty, until Mark stepped out from the shadows. There she is, he slurred, his voice low. Too good to answer my calls? Please, Lila whispered. She's sleeping. You think you can keep her from me? He snapped, stepping closer. I could make this ugly. You never cared about her, she said, voice trembling. Mark lunged for her bag. I just need help. You owe me. I owe you nothing. She tried to move past him, shielding the stroller. Her fingers reached for her phone, but he knocked it from her hand. The rain blurred her vision. Lucy stirred, whimpered, then headlights sliced through the alley. A black car stopped hard. Nathan stepped out, rain soaking his shirt. He did not hesitate. Step away from her, he said firmly. Mark turned. Who the hell are you? Nathan's voice was calm, cold. I am the man who will have you arrested in 5 minutes.